So I'm hopeful, but we are not there yet.
Are there any plans of these large investors to also invest into turning human feces into manure?
They're not, as far as I know. I have, of course, one of the. So I don't know whether this is the point you're trying to raise, but food is a system. It's a very complex system. There are a lot of things that come together in food. And the manure cycle, of course, is one of them. And a lot of people have been telling me, well, we need the animals for the manure, which is basically crap, which is kind of funny. Because we produce a lot of manure. In the future, we have 10 billion people producing manure. And so we are now sort of flushing it down the toilet, but there's no reason to flush it down the toilet. You can spread it over the land if you want, to close the nitrogen cycle and the phosphorus cycle a little bit better than we're doing right now. So it's a good point. One of the things that I'm not completely sure about is how are we going to deal with sort of cycles of microorganisms in that regard. So that's somebody has to look at that very carefully, because we are creating among the most, not the most prevalent, but the most sort of invasive species on this planet, being human beings. We are creating an internal cycle of microorganisms, viruses, and things like that. So we have to look at that. But in principle, it would be a great idea.
You mentioned the investors. What scale we are talking about? Are they really into that right now? First question. And the second is, are there any farmer associations? Because for farmer, I know that they're very strong, rebelling against or pushing your efforts back, so political-wise, on the political level?
Right. The scale is actually tremendous. I was yesterday at a conference where people were comparing the scale of investments with the internet bubble. There is, at this point, without any product yet, in all these industries, there's $5 billion of investment. It's crazy. It's really crazy. In terms of farmer associations, not really. The American U.S. Cattlemen's Association has recently filed a petition, which on a kind of a silly subject is that we should not be allowed to call this meat, which is kind of a weird battle to fight, I guess. And it's just in one state in the U.S., but it probably will trickle down to a couple of other states. But I think, I've thought about farmers a lot. I don't think, strangely enough, not so much about slaughterers, which, of course, their industry will disappear too. But for some reason, I have less empathy with slaughterers than with farmers. Although they are also human beings like you and me, and they're not criminals, I can tell you. I know quite a few. But for the farmers, it's, we shouldn't underestimate the farmers. Farmers are ultimate entrepreneurs. They do whatever they need to extract value from their land. So my neighbor used to be a pig farmer, could no longer make money with pigs because it's a really bad situation. And he switched to potatoes. And he now loves his potatoes as much as he used to love his pigs. So they switch if they have time and if they have the opportunity to switch. And a lot of them will have time because this is going to take 20, 25, 30 years. This is not going to be, in my mind, a disruption. This is going to be kind of a transformation. And it inevitably, due to the process, it will take time.
Cool. Thanks for your talk. It's really interesting. But I guess I want to play devil's advocate here for a minute. And I'm just thinking back to that very first slide that you put up of the Soylent product, which is obviously like taken from the film Soylent Green, which is
right.
The Charlton Heston movie where like he finally discovers that they're putting humans back into the food chain and whatever. Right. So I guess the point being like how can people... It also brings me to that notion of this idea of yuck and the inclination of the London Times to put that headline under your work. And I guess the point is like, how can we trust like, how can we trust the farmers or whoever who are trying to drive as much profit out of their produce? How can we trust them to put the right things into the food chain, even though your work might have the best intentions?
Yeah, I think there are two kind of boring instruments for that. One is regulation and, of course, oversight. So government oversight, which we currently have. Every cow that's slaughtered is checked, at least in the Netherlands. And I'm sure there are a lot of industrialized countries where the same is happening. The other thing could be more technological. I mean, we can authenticate this. So one interesting question that at some point came up is, how do you know in the future? This is a weird question, but I get these weird questions. How do you in the future know that you are eating genuine cultured meat and not some fake natural meat, right? And that you're going to be fooled in, yes, for the meat that you're eating, an animal has been killed. So how are you going to do that? And of course, there are technological ways to authenticate that. A very simple ones, actually, to authenticate that. But that we might end up in a situation like that, where we need to do that, yes.
Mm-hmm. Last question, yes. Or last 3 seconds.
Is not a question, but just a suggestion. I think the American Association of Farmers have a point. Why don't you call it just meat, M-E-E-T?
Right. Well, my suggestion was even different. Let's call it meat, exclamation mark, because you can translate that in any language. And people will know, this is a little bit different because it has an exclamation mark. Yeah. I mean, the name is still a tricky issue. I'm just a scientist, so I look at this as this is exactly the same as what we're currently eating. So let's call it the same, but let's add a qualifier so that people understand that it's made in a different way. That to me makes most sense. But it's I was recently at the Harvard Law School where we had two days discussing this. And do you know how many years of legislation it took for peanut butter to be called peanut butter? Although it was not a dairy product and technically no butter, do you know? 20 years of legislation. I don't want to go into that. I don't want to spend 20 years of my life and my energy in going into legislation. So we'll figure it out how we call it. I think at this point, so the surveys that have been done around different names: cultured meat, clean meat, lab-based meat, lab-grown meat, in vitro meat, cell-based meat, all the other sort of terms, and it doesn't really matter a lot. Granted, in all those cases, we had meat and a qualifier.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we have to stop,
right.
But I will raise the last question. Timing. Can you tell us, like you predicted in 2020 it will cost $11 or euros. Where do you see this going? You also said maybe in 20 years this is just normal. But
right.
When will it be the first thing on the market? Like, can we say 2025 and I can eat
the question
again?
is at Rewe or at
a bio-organic
right.
market?
Right. So we think that products like these will come to the market in about 3 years from now, which basically has to do with regulation. It takes about a year and a half to regulate this in Europe.
Yeah, because the plant-based is already on the market.
The plant-based is on the market, yes. Yeah. Yes.
And it tastes like meat.
Not in Europe, though. The Impossible Burger is not on the market in Europe. And it may be problematic because it's a GMO product. It may be the Impossible Burger, the Beyond Burger will be on the market earlier here in the Netherlands.
Okay,
and actually, a German company has already that license to do that.
Okay, cool. And in one other talk you had, you said it would be 9 weeks to grow it home.
Right.
So there could be something like your lab in small for everybody at home.
Yeah, you could if you know 9 weeks in advance what you want to eat,
Yeah,
or
okay. Yeah, that's okay.
Which I typically don't. But No. It's of course if that's one way. You can also have 63 bioreactors in your kitchen next to each other, growing for every day.
Big kitchen.
So it becomes a little bit more complex, and we're not quite there yet.
Okay.
So I don't think, I'm usually referring to. So I'm not from this field. I'm a medical doctor. So I use observations that everybody can make. So in the Netherlands, 20 years ago, there was this hype of giving bread makers to fathers for Father's Day. That was the ultimate sort of gift for Father's Day. So everybody got a bread maker. For 2 months, the local mills could not handle the demand for flour. And after 2 months, it kind of tailed off again. And now all these bread makers are collecting dust on the attic. And trust me, making bread is a lot easier than making meat. So I don't think, I don't predict this is going to be a big thing, but it can be done.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mark Post.
Thank you.